Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Jason's engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. Yeah, I've been thinking about, this has been bothering me. I've been thinking about electricity. And for the last several weeks, I've been thinking about this, laying awake at night. And here it is. So if you look at the power grid in the United States of America, half of it is connected to the ground, literally. And you've heard that term. Is it grounded? Is it shorted? Which means, shorted to ground typically. Not always, but sometimes. And you look at those power cords and, let's say you have a coffee maker. And that coffee maker has a standard AC wall plug, 2 wires with a plug on the end. You plug that into the wall. One of those wires is to the ground. And when I say to the ground, I mean it is literally at your electrical breaker box or fuse box or electrical service panel. One of those wires is attached to a heavy copper wire that is run outside the building, attached to a ground rod that's 8 feet long, and it's pounded into the ground, all except for maybe the last inch or two. And sometimes they just disappear because the ground covers them up, over time, and you can't find them. But at the bottom of every power pole, there is a coil of wire, a circle of wire, concentric circle, that goes all the way up to the top of the power pole, heavy copper wire. You can just look at any power pole, any of those wooden power poles, you'll see it. Stapled, goes all the way up to the top, connects to one of those wires that travels horizontally across the landscape to the next power pole, which has a ground wire that goes down to the ground, and it's buried, 6 feet deep. So half of our electric grid is connected to the ground. Your computer, it's got 2 wires, sometimes 3. Let me tell you what the colors are so you can identify this easily. If you were to cut open one of those 3 conductor computer power cords, one of the wires would be green. That's the ground wire. One of the wires would be white. That's also connected to the ground. It's called common, but it's connected to the ground. Sometimes it's called neutral. Sometimes it's called common, but it's connected to the ground. And the other one's black. And that one is considered the hot one. The one that carries the electricity. So, in the case of your computer, 2 of the 3 wires go to the ground. In the case of your kitchen mixer, 1 of the 2 wires goes to the ground. In the case of your microwave oven, 2 of the 3 wires go to the ground because it has a three-prong plug. So think about this, and then think about all these wires that we have in our house that pick up electricity because they act as antennas as well. And so they pick up radio frequencies. The wiring in your house picks up your Wi-Fi. It picks up television signals. I'm talking about your power wiring, that Romex wiring in your wall. It picks up radio signals, radio frequencies, television signals. It picks up microwave signals. All the electricity that's in the air get picked up either by the ground, it gets lost in the atmosphere, or it gets picked up wires that bring it to the ground. So my question is really this. Because of all of these conveniences, and this is all man-made, we did this. We generate electricity with fossil fuels, natural gas, coal. We generate with nuclear decay, and we generate it with dammed up water. So we make all this electricity, and half of it goes into the ground. So my question is, have we damaged the planet with all of this electricity? So what are your thoughts? Anybody there?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
You didn't introduce me? You told me not to. I didn't know you were asking me that question.
Yeah, I'm asking you. So what are your thoughts about all that?
I had no clue. I was told to be quiet. I'm standing over in the corner out there in the hallway.
No, I tell you what.
The highest grade in algebra. Now listen, what you just said has several ways of looking at things, including flat Earth and round Earth, because in metaphor, all roads lead to Rome, but you need a North Star, a point of reference, to know which direction you're going in. Okay? So that's what ground is. It's your point of reference. It's in reference to something. When you talk 60 cycles does not mean it's vibrating at 60 times a second, because in Europe it's 50. And you need a converter. So what you're saying is not functionally like Edison and those guys. You need a point of reference. Is it to this or to that? And Earth, remember, you take your socks off and you wiggle your toes in the surf, in the soil, and you're, quote, grounded. Yeah, metaphor abound. It is a point of reference that can have many different meanings, including round and flat. And when you realize that the Ark of the Covenant was a gigantic battery, and what they did, that's when Moses' sister looked in it and her face was scarred. That's battery acid. And when you stuck the poles from the Ark of the Covenant in the ground and the armies wiggled like worms, what does that remind you of? Sticking power into the earth, or going from one electrode to the other, and by the time it goes from one house to the other, it's pretty well absorbed down to the billionth degree, so there isn't any worms unless the Ark of the Covenant was a very large battery. Now, the second rabbit hole that led to a different Warren on your initial statement was about the grid situation that Matt Stein and I talked about. Yes, we have a grid for the United States, and there's a second grid for the state of Texas. Now, that means Texas is its own country, with an EMP strike, whatever. There's a lot of different ways one can see what you're asking, and so I'm not sure which way you want me to go, but grounding is used in psychology, like you hit me with a flat iron skillet and I'm grounded. I got the message, that kind of thing. I try not to use bad words. Now, I don't know how to respond to that, because electricity could have not been back and forth, like cycles. It could have been a direct current as opposed to an alternate current, just like analog doesn't have to be analog, it could be digital. It's a way of compiling information. And the idea is electricity real? Well, if I got hit by a lightning bolt, I'd certainly... Why is the lightning bolt going from the cloud down to Earth? Why does it want to hit a tall tree before it gets to the Earth? And then going through the tree down into the Earth again. So are we damaging the Earth with our electricity? No. That is absurd, because humans' resonance is the vibratory harmonic created from lightning strikes at any point on Earth at any given moment, and that's Schumann's resonance. And that for Titan, a little asteroid out there by Jupiter, is 4, to be distinguished from Earth, which is 8.637 and that had to do with theta and certain grades of sleep grades, like, sleep 1, sleep 2. You have different kinds of dream states and where they occur. And this kind of a dream has to do with Schumann's resonance and vibratory resonance with the Earth. Say, where do you want to go with that? How's that one for an opening?
One of the things I wanted to do was explain what you meant, or explain what I meant at the opening of this broadcast. So you don't lose power by using ground. Okay, it doesn't work like that. What ground does is it's an attenuator. Attenuation is absorption. And so if you have complete absorption, what would be your best attenuator? The biggest object there is. Is that you? Is that your house? Is that your city? Or is that your planet? Mm-hmm. Ground. What I wanted to share with the class was I wanted to surprise the class with you being on the air today. And so what I said, I've been thinking about this for several days. What is the best way to introduce Ricky for this broadcast on Thursday?
Oh, Ricky.
So what I thought was I could just ask a question without the normal, introduction of the instructor. Just ask the question and then have Rick just respond. And everybody knows who Rick is. So that was my intent.
I like the Blues Brother one better.
Well, that was my intent. So at the last moment, just before the broadcast started, I asked Jason, I said, Jason, can you do me a favor? Can you ask Rick not to say anything and let me just ask this question? And when I say, what are your thoughts? Then have Rick come in.
Well, I didn't know that. I wasn't told that, Mr. Q.
Well, that was it.
Sort of like my pen, I was still on the toilet or whatever. Yeah, but, it's, hey, how did he put it? Hey, it's me. And don't mess with the Fonz.
So, here's, you brought up a really, really important point. And
what, the
when we talked about,
Covenant?
well, when I'm specifically referring to when you talked about attenuation.
Yes.
And there are a couple things there. And you're right. What is the biggest attenuator? Well, the biggest one that's around here in Missouri is the planet. The biggest one that's in Grants Pass, Oregon is the planet Earth. And what we seem to be doing is sending everything. We're sending everything to the ground. Okay. Trash, pretty much everything comes into the ground, whether we burn it and the particles fall down to the ground and get spread over a wide area, or whether we just dump it, or we dump it in the sea. I mean, it goes into the planet, and that's the biggest attenuator until it can't take it anymore. And one of the points that you made is why, or questions you asked is why does lightning hit the building or the tree? Because it's the tallest or the closest to the lightning. And electricity, flat out, is lazy. And I'm not exaggerating. Electricity is lazy, and it wants the shortest path to the ground. And that's the answer. It wants the shortest path to the ground. So the tree is the shortest path to the ground, or the building. We'll be right back. So we're talking about the power grid, and we're talking about grounding, and we're talking about electricity, and half the power grid is connected to the ground, literally. And we've done this. I mean, before man, none of this was here. And the big question is, how much are we damaging the planet? Let me give you an example, class. So there are many stories of farms and farmers that go out in their field and they see the cows they pick up their feet and they shake their hooves and they kind of dance around, kind of like something's bothering them. And what happens is when it rains, the electricity travels through the ground more easily than when there's a drought. So some of these power lines that are buried seem to develop faults, ground faults, and the electricity goes into the ground. And the cows walk near that area, and they can't stand it. They're being electrocuted through their hooves. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. Other animals experience the same thing. So there are all kinds of problems with electricity and the ground. And our electrical system was designed to have half of it be the ground and the other half be insulated from the ground. But the other half that's insulated from the ground is trying its best to get to the ground. Rick, how much do you think, or have we damaged the planet or not with this crazy scheme because of we want convenience? We want that electric coffee maker to wake up before we do, make the coffee so we can have it ready in the morning. Our cell phones, all the rest of these gadgets that we think are necessary, that consume electricity. How much have we damaged the planet, if at any?
So is he there? No,
I mean, it's a tough question.
Here we go. I'm trying to be mindful. Okay, so you have a choice of looking at it as damaging the earth or it's flat. And if you look at it this way, then these are the solutions. And if you look at it that way, those are the solutions. When you log an area, for example, I'm using this as a metaphor. When you log an area, if you leave the logging there, then you have a forest. If you remove the log, now you have barren. And it's a metaphor again of you're touching the toes. Is that horse out there prancing because he's being electrocuted or revived? And the correct answer is yes, because that's what they call grounding and metaphor to Om Shri Padme Om. I mean, you know, if you look at it this way, you're being grounded and the horse is dancing. And if you look at it that way, the horse is in pain. Is it in pain or is it being recharged and renewed? And the correct answer again is yes, because both are true, predicated on your definitions and assumed truths. You know, like whether or not Jesus saves. It's arbitrary. And it is the limitation of what science is and what it is not. And everybody feels that science is the leading religion of the world today, because if science has the answer, then it must be good. And that's not true either, because science isn't real. It is one half of two sides now, like Joni Mitchell would say. I can see both sides now. And that is what I'm trying to suggest, why we have two brains and why you have choice in terms of how you choose to see what's going on. Yesterday, I went up to get a riding lawnmower that they were going to give away, Craftsman, an old Craftsman. You know, it needed a fuel line and a starter switch. And you start it with a screwdriver. And they're going to give it to me. But to get up that hill, I had to go 3.5 miles on a single dirt road up to 2,600 feet, straight down. And when I got up there, here's this mansion that a woman has dug in 30 years and been living there for 30 years, and she's downsized. And so by the way, they listen to your show. She's listening right now. Thank you very much. She's half Chinese and half American, and she's got
We'll be right back. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us, richardallenmiller.com, Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com. Rick, you were telling us about this Craftsman riding lawnmower, and did you want to continue that story?
Well, I just met some very interesting people that were up on top of a mountain, had been there 30 years, and when I thought I was a prepper, I mean, this woman had her behind together. I mean, really impressive. With wood, you know, chop wood, carrying water, that kind of thing. It was amazing to realize that Williams, Oregon have some dug-in hippies that have been there a long time and have their act together in the event of grid-down situation. This woman wouldn't even know the difference other than she can't use a cell phone, but she can certainly pick up radio stations. And so she's in the middle of nowhere with Radio Free America, listening to what's going on in the universe, and how it was a journey just to get to her location. Should have seen this we figured out how to get this lawnmower in my truck without having to take the camper top off. That was interesting. How did you get it up into the truck when you can't lift it? We used some physics, and it worked. It fine. It took us half an hour to get this lawnmower into the truck. We took the steering wheel off, and everything went downhill from there. It was all easy. Now, I'm impressed with realizing how innovative some people are that would listen to radio but not use a computer per se. It's interesting, concepts going on out there. And that was that was what I did yesterday. I went a journey into the woods. I got up to about maybe 2,500 feet and on a mountaintop, and had a home that was built up there with inlaid slate and kitchen floors. This thing was incredible. And I remember living kind of like that when I was working with the military, where you had to come in to get me. You had to come in with a helicopter because you had to walk into where I was, and it would be a journey. And so they would always bring a helicopter in to get me out. I was like trying to be a real mountain man, I just remember putting up, 20 cord just for that winter to heat my home. Frost lines started at 3 feet, and that's where they started, and would get to 20 below zero for 2 weeks at a time. The chuckers would be on a tree 4 across as big fat wound bottles because they were cold, and they just sat there as birds, chuckers. And it was interesting, to live like that and realize there's going to be a time, because of the way America is changing, we are never going to go back to what we were with groups and football games and things like that because of technology. And, the weaponization of things. And whether or not they're real or not, you have no idea of the potential. And because it's about potential, there has to be some kind of due diligence in protecting oneself. And I don't have the answers. I'm sitting here as an old person, so very glad I'm not a Gen X. I wouldn't want to live in this new world the way it's going. And none of us have any say in it.
But we're the guys that our generation and a few before us are the ones that made this mess.
Well, that's the deal. Greed is good. I'm going to build this nuclear power plant, and I'll let you worry about how to get rid of the waste.
Yeah, and there's a term for that. There's a term for that, and it's called externalization. And, I don't remember learning that term when I went to the university to study finance and economics. So I spent 6 years in the classroom.
That's because your set of values are different. And each generation is different. Are they better or worse? Well, yes and no. I was raised to respect age. No matter what, that person had to go through more lessons than I did. And for me to presume I'm more deserving is not correct. And yet, the Gen X's in their big, giant white trucks roaring down the street as me first because I've got a bigger truck and I'm tougher, is called in a food line, we call that crowding. And I am watching the way people behave as me first. And it's a shame because there's a disparity between war babies and baby boomers, and the different generations. And today, these kids think they have the answers, and you've got a handful of problems I can't even want to address. For example, your New Madrid fault line. You can see Yellowstone now with tomography as far as Ohio, and if you follow the lava flows and how they're going to blow when Yellowstone goes, the Midwest is going to be cut in half with the Mississippi River flooding. That's by all standards, not just, Chet Snow or Scallion or Edgar Casey. It's any way you look at it, it's going to happen. And because it takes one full year to power one of these nuclear power plants down, your region at some point is, if they're not careful, is going to be uninhabitable. Because when the grid goes down, that's it. And it isn't going to be so easy to bring it back up. And that's what Matt's story or paper that was in Workbook 2 titled 400 Chernobyls. Now, that was before Fukushima when he wrote that. And what you have now in the Midwest is at least 28 Fukushima-like events that can happen. And in New York on the Hudson, it's Indian Point. Down in Florida, the list goes on. Why are we not talking about those kinds of things in the media? And oh, by the way, I just wanted to make a comment. When you first came on the air, before you came on, they were doing the news, and some guy in a commercial, before they finished the news, talked so fast. How did he do that? Well, they speeded up his audio, but it was crazy because even with my fast rapid, I couldn't understand a single thing he said. Why did they do that? Is it a game, or is it plausible deniability because we said it? Or what was that about? There are so many things like that going on. I, of course, know why they did it, but how does one do that? Just like that. Do you remember that one? Play it out, man. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, Rick.
It's commercial?
Rick,
that's not a commercial. That's something else.
You mentioned the New Madrid fault in Missouri.
Yes, I did.
On the edge of Missouri, and that's a concern. But I'm looking at a map right now of the nuclear reactors across the United States of America, and pretty much most of the people in the country are downwind from a nuclear reactor. For example, in Washington, you have one nuclear reactor in the southeastern corner. California has 4 on the coast. Arizona has 3. Texas has 4. Louisiana has 2. But the ones in Louisiana are right next to Mississippi. Okay? And Mississippi is to the east of Louisiana. Arkansas has 2. Missouri has 1. And
it only took one in
if you look at the concentration,
the entire west coast of the United States. One event.
Right. So if you think about
30 foot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying, Rick,
what's
is
going to happen?
Yeah, even though the United States has its major density of nuclear reactors, if you cut the country in half, north and south, and you say, okay, so you draw a line from the north to the south, through North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, and you say, okay, you have that line going vertically, and you look to the right. Most of the reactors are on the right side, meaning Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Arkansas, Louisiana, Illinois is really dense with them. Okay, and so the wind blowing from west to east, everybody gets it really, and those who live on the west coast of the United States get it from Europe. So if, there's so many nuclear reactors, regardless of the New Madrid fault, there's so many other reactors. There are 104 of them. And you're right, it takes a year to shut one down. And we don't have a year's worth of fuel. So if one goes down, if the grid goes down, we don't have a cooling system, right? The cooling system would be backed up by a generator, and that has 30 days worth of fuel. So we got 30 days to shut down a reactor that takes a year. And that is the greed. That is the externalization. That is, we'll let somebody else worry about that.
And then you talk
Future
about blogging and
that's what we've done.
I helped Paul Newman write that spotted owl thing. And when Clinton went to Portland, Gore spent 3 days in my home talking to me about wanting to be on his cabinet. And I asked him what planet he was from when he told me that agriculture was not important, that we could let other countries supply the United States on that we should focus on high-tech physics. And one of the reasons as a physicist I went into agriculture is because that's primary, like our water. And if water and food, that's why I teach children aquaculture, because they're going to need to know how to produce their own food when your so-called just-in-time delivery systems are locked down like they were during the virus. Now, cities like Chattanooga already have started an infrastructure where every single restaurant on the Chattanooga River have a greenhouse. They right now produce 40% of the food consumed in that city. And some of the skyscrapers in New Jersey across the river from the Hudson, these big giant skyscrapers, the top of all of those skyscrapers is their farming garden to feed the cafeteria in that building. Now, I am going to tell everybody, you want to start prepping, I think the first thing that you start to do, there's 3 minutes for air, 3 days for water, and 3 weeks for food. What's important? You start with your air. And, what we're breathing.
All right, we'll be right back. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Rick, most of the reactors are designed to be close to large volumes of water. So, for example, they're usually near large lakes or rivers or the ocean. And the reason for that is nuclear reactors generate so much heat that heat has to be dumped someplace. And it's easier to move water a shorter distance than it is to move it to a farther distance. So what they do is they put nuclear reactors close to bodies of water, and some of them are the oceans. And I guess, like in Fukushima, the General Electric engineers threw caution to the wind and said, don't worry about a tsunami, don't worry about a storm surge, it'll be okay. And as we all know, it was not okay. So it's easier to move electricity than it is to move water. So the idea is put the reactors closer to the source of the water and move the electricity farther. And if you think about it, where are the reactors? Well, the reactors are close to where the consumption is. And the consumption is where there's a high density of people. And that's why most of the nuclear reactors in the United States are on the East Coast, where most people live. So the highest density of population, that's where the nuclear reactors are. It's amazing. And we've done this to ourselves, and we didn't need to do it because the electric companies are in the business of selling electricity. They're not in the business of conserving electricity. So the bottom line there is that why conserve electricity? We'll just pollute the planet more, faster, and throw caution to the wind. It's absolutely insane what we have done.
Oregon developed a buoy that goes up and down with the tide every day. And that buoy generates power because of its movement. It's, in the ocean. And when I was up in Nova Scotia, in the northern part of that island, Nova Scotia is an island, They had tide changes up there of 60 feet during the day. And I did a quick calculation, and just putting buoys up at the northern end of Nova Scotia was enough tidal movement to empower the entire northern part of the eastern seaboard, all the way down to Florida, just from Nova Scotia. And when you talk about the Tanana Chiefs and the pipeline coming out of Alaska, and the complications they had going across Indian reservations in North and South Dakota and just running oil all the way from Alaska, as opposed to power from buoys in Nova Scotia. I don't understand why the old families, what they did in Oregon 2 months ago was that they opened up spotted owl land that was unloggable to the old families of Oregon for economic relief. And there was a feeding frenzy. And in 2 months, there was 57,000 acres in local Oregon, down where I live, whacked in less than 2 months. And I'm not kidding. This just happened. Unbelievable. And yet, I have a cultivar of hemp that grows 15 feet per year. And right now, they're doing experiments on the Columbia River with cottonwood that will grow 7 to 10 feet a year using old heli loggers. The loggers wanted to use the old equipment. They want to keep all their jobs. And so they got all the heli loggers now coppicing the top 10 feet of cottonwood on the Columbia River. And yet, the nuts of growing hemp and medical marijuana and CBD is rampant. And nobody has realized that even if you grow hemp as a virgin white paper, a book I wrote with Chuck Walters 25 years ago, nobody is talking to me about that because I'm a persona non grata, and I'm unbelievably disappointed in mentality of greed first, rather than thinking about a simple incubator, putting a small field in, showing how fast it grows and what your yield per acre is in biomass. It has always been used for rope and sailcloth. When you make sailcloth, a sail out of hemp, it's strong and can take on the winds. It's a sailboat. And rope, same thing. But as a virgin white paper, there is nothing that can compete to it. And even if you made toilet paper, you wouldn't get high.
Yeah, Rick, you mentioned the Columbia River. There's radioactive waste still flowing in the Columbia River from the Hanford, the Hanford plant.
They're already seeing it as far as San Francisco and the tuna that they're pulling in out of San Francisco now from the Columbia River. It's not from Fukushima. It's from Hanford leaking.
And we did it. And we did it during World War II to make the bombs for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan. We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prayers. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. And we've been talking about the destruction of the planet. We've done it. It has happened on our watch. It's happened before our watch. It's happened on our watch. It's happening during our watch. It continues to happen. And even in our neck of the woods, they're putting up more power lines. More major power lines. These are not just little runs to homes and businesses. I'm talking about major high-tension power lines. Still putting them up. And, Rick, wouldn't you think that the answer would be, you know what, let's use less electricity? Because if you look up at the skies with all these planes that are not flying, the skies look so much better. The skies are clearer. Clouds look more like 1950, 1960 rather than 2018. What are your thoughts?
I don't know what to think about anything anymore. I try to watch the news every day on the internet and what's getting posted by all the different networks. And I watch the distinction between ABC and Fox News, which are at loggerheads with each other. And I remember the way it used to be and now how it's quite different. And I can't trust anything anymore, including alternative media, including myself. And one example, I've been with Facebook since it first started. I don't know if people realize it or not, but I was one of the people that Mark Hume hired to change PC Link into AOL. I started as teaching the first online courses in America with Interactive Educational Service out of Humboldt. And that's where my metaphysics became accredited at Harvard University for graduate level course credit. And it was at that time, they only had the very finest instructors trying to teach different things. And I taught metaphysics because I had been teaching at Evergreen and the University of Washington on shamanism. And what I was doing was moving shamanism into higher levels of consciousness is what I was trying to do. That's John Curtis Gowan, Chapter 8 in Power Tools and the Ontology of Mystical States. And what's happened with Facebook is unbelievable. I started when they first started, way back when, and yesterday, one of the things I posted was Dr. Rashid Buttar, who is, in my humble opinion, an extremely knowledgeable, he's like Dr. Norm Shealy. And he had, the posting I did was, we have undercover footage, it's time to make this public, by Dr. Rashid Buttar. And I started to post that, and Facebook tried to stop me. And I took them to task on it in terms of the way I posted it. I said, quote, why would Facebook question the credibility of my posting this man's opinion? Better yet, why would an opinion be considered false? And then I said it would be nice if Facebook were also questioned on their beliefs, and more importantly, why? And that's when they let me post it, but then they had to put right under it, partially false information, checked by independent fact checkers. And then one of the comments on, and I'm going to read it to you, is a wonderful comment from one of the people that made a comment. He said, quote, I have to look him up. Oh, yes, there he is. Wonder if they do this with the Bible. And, you know, I am fed up with being censored by anybody because, in my humble opinion, I know I don't know. And everything that I've ever tried to do was I work with my gut, my instinct, and I have an exceptional educational background with more than 24 Nobel Prize laureates training me, including, you know, Roger Penrose, whom wrote Geometric Universe, and I then, as a student under him, wrote the Dodecahedral Universe as a place beyond it. And what I'm discovering is that they're trying to censor America. And who are they? Well, I don't know. I don't think that the Republican or Democrat, I think they've both been infiltrated by something alien. I mean, I don't know, but the whole thing. How do you feel about being censored when you're trying to tell somebody how to fix their automobile? Does it mean you're right or wrong? And does someone have a right to make judgment on you?
Well, what I find with automobiles, it's kind of interesting. When someone has a problem with their automobile, I try to explain exactly what caused the problem why it's a problem, and the alternatives to repairing the vehicle. And what I find with most people now is they don't even want to hear it. They don't want to hear what caused it. They don't want to hear how to prevent it. They just want it fixed, and they want it fixed cheaply. And let's continue that line of thought. What I've noticed in the last couple of years is I don't even know the word for this, but let me describe the situation. People buy cars, expensive cars, and we'll use Mercedes-Benz for an example. So let's say there is and typically Mercedes are bought by people who have saved some money. They want a quality product. And they meet with the salesman. The salesman says, this is a great car. This has a transmission that is sealed for life. You do not have to change the transmission fluid. You don't have to do that because it's sealed for life. And so the customer, the potential buyer, thinks that's a good thing. Customer buys the vehicle, gets about 40,000 miles on it. And what happens with the transmission is there are clutch plates. And the clutch plates are made of a friction-type material that, through the action of engaging and disengaging, the clutch plates wear. And these little particles of friction material end up in the automatic transmission fluid. And there's a filter that stops them from doing damage throughout the automatic transmission, through because they're very abrasive. Well, that's all good. But what happens is, because this transmission is sealed for life, the filter gets plugged up at about 40,000 miles, and the transmission stops working. So the customer then, years later, brings it back to the dealership, because everybody knows that's where you bring your car to get it fixed, if you want it done right. And Mercedes people tend to bring their Mercedes to the dealership because they expect that a dealership is better than Jiffy Lube or Walmart or some other shade tree mechanic. So they bring it to the dealer, and the dealer says, oh, geez, boy, that's 150,000 miles, 140, 130. Yeah, transmission shot. And the cost of a new transmission is more expensive than the vehicle is worth. So we'll be glad to take it in on trade, and we're not going to give you much for it because the transmission's shot. It's junk now, and we'll sell you a new one. Now, what really is the situation is that transmission, in many cases, and we've proven this here at the farm many times, can be fixed by simply draining the transmission fluid, flushing the transmission with clean fluid, putting a new filter on, and putting it back together. And then once you do that, you need a computer reprogrammer, which we have, and we can tell it that, no, it's okay. We can tell the transmission, no, look, you're okay. We fixed it. Everything's fine. Reset the transmission control computer, and the car is fine. That is the situation. But what really happens is that the owner of that Mercedes that brought it to the dealership has been, in my opinion, fleeced by the dealership because the dealer does not want to service the transmission. And it's not a big problem. It really isn't. Now, Jiffy Lube can't do it. Many of your local shops, the small ones can't do it because they need a computer that is, roughly $1,000 to reprogram the transmission control computer. But it's more than that. We had a Mercedes here in 2004, and I worked on it. It had a blown compressor. The compressor seized it. The compressor clutch failed and twisted the shaft on the input of the air conditioning compressor. So our son replaced the compressor. We replaced all the major components that you would normally want to replace if you had a compressor failure, like the receiver dryer filter and the expansion valve. So three parts were replaced: the compressor, the receiver dryer expansion valve. The receiver dryer filter and the expansion valve. Those three parts. And I recharged it. I evacuated the system, charged it with refrigerant, It didn't work. It would not work. And I thought, something's really, really wrong. Everything that I know about the fluid dynamics, everything I know about the physics of it, it should work. But it would not work. And there was a blockage. And what it really was, the blockage was the computer that controls the air conditioner told a valve, do not open. And because this computer control valve wouldn't open, the air conditioning system didn't work. That was the only reason. So there you have that $1,000 or so computer that you need to tell the air conditioning computer to knock it off and open up that valve. So what we have now is a barrier to entry. The average owner of a vehicle is not going to spend $1,000 nor learn how to use that $1,000 computer tool to reprogram the broken systems on cars, whether it be the cooling system, the HVAC system, the fuel injection system, the traction control system, the braking system, the security system, the lighting system. All those systems have computer controls.
And now those computers, by the way, can be hacked from a remote.
Yeah, so we have a serious problem. We are being held hostage by the dealerships who have these computers but don't want to use them. So they have the tools to fix the cars, but they want to sell you a new car. But they don't want to fix the old car. And what really happens, the older ones are easier to fix than the newer ones, because the newer ones are even more complex, because the lazy customers, the lazy Americans, really, if you think about it, do you really need to have a separate heating control for the driver or a separate air conditioning control for the driver versus the passenger? Do you really need to air condition two different temperatures inside the cab, which you're sitting 1 foot away from the guy next to you? Do you really need to do that? Well, you need a computer for that. At least the automakers think you do. We'll be right back. So the bottom line, class, is that things have gotten very complicated. So complicated that most people cannot work on their cars anymore. And if you listen to, and the problems that I was talking about with, the Mercedes, for example, the owners have been conned by dealerships to believe that their car is worth less than it is and that they need a different car.
It's about the figure. Last night when we spoke, we couldn't remember Curtis Mathis.
Right.
Go for it.
Yeah, Curtis Mathis was it was a lifetime
designed to fail.
Yeah, Curtis Mathis was designed to be fixed. That was a brand name of like television. You could buy, if you wanted to spend the most and buy what was supposedly the best television available, that was a Curtis Mathis. But you could buy an RCA or a Zenith, and they were quality as well, and they had tubes, and you could change the tubes and fix them. And even in the early days of solid state televisions,
remember how you adjust your tubes to see if you needed to replace them? They had a little thing down at Safeway. You plug your tube in to see if it needed to be replaced because it was a one-way current kind of thing, a gator.
Yeah, there was a what would happen, class, is you might have, and I'm just going to pick a number out of the air, let's say 15 tubes in a television set. And they all had, there was a map on the back inside cover of the television set box. And you would look at this map, and it had all the names of the tubes, like 12BE6, that kind of thing. And you could wiggle them out. They were glass tubes. You could wiggle them out, put them in a bag or a little box, carefully so they wouldn't break. Take them to the drugstore or the supermarket, and they had tube testers right up front. And you'd walk in, and it was self-serve, and you'd take the tubes out of your bag or box, and you would read the chart, 12BE6, and it would say, okay, set dial number 1 to D, set dial number 2 to J, set dial number 3 to Q. And, you'd set a whole bunch of dials, and then you would press the test button, and you would hold that down, and it would warm up the tube, and 30 seconds later it would say whether the tube was weak, or bad, or weak, or good. And then if it was good, you put that back in, off to the side. If it was bad, you knew that you could get a replacement, and you buy it right there. And for $3.29 or less, typically you could buy a replacement tube. You knew which ones were bad, take them back and put them back in, and back in business you were. That's the way it used to be. Now, if you didn't want to do that, you could bring the whole TV to the TV repair shop, and they would do that. Or if they would, if there was a more serious problem, they could solve that by replacing resistors and capacitors and
using a oscilloscope or something to see where the signal was wrong.
Right. Now, getting back to the car issue, the Mercedes car issue, what's happening is a mechanic could fix that car for about $100 in parts and, let's say, a few hours in labor. But instead, the customer is being told that the transmission is bad, it's no good. And when people hear the word transmission, they think the first number is a 4, followed by, 3 more digits. So $4,000, $5,000 or more. So now the customer has been conditioned that if it's a transmission problem, you throw the car away. That's what you do.
The same thing, by the way, happened in drugstores, because the old drugstores used to have a wall of rose sulfur, potassium nitrate. You could go in and get your chemistry. And I, as a little brat kid, had my Chemcraft chemistry set and learned how to make pipe bombs really early on. I called them rocket ships, but really they were pipe bombs. And I made my own gunpowder and nitroglycerin, and I went downhill from there. Today, your pharmacy has, like vitamin C, 12 different kinds. One's from rose hips, another's from acerola, another one's from da-da-da-da-da. And you don't have the action of working with chemistry anymore. What you have is trying to find out who's most credible, like Now Foods over rainy day products. And
yeah, Rick, just for clarification purposes, we're not suggesting anybody make pipe bombs. And by the way, the difference between the difference between a rocket that the government sends out into space and a pipe bomb is the rocket has a release for the energy, where a pipe bomb doesn't. Dr. Richard Alan Miller is with us. Class, if you'd like to go to the website, richardalanmiller.com, Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com. Welcome, Robert in Kansas. Thank you for being on hold.
Morning, Vincent, Dr. Miller. It is so nice to finally be learning about the flat Earth here at USA Prepares. I'm probably the most excited student, but yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
And Vince, what's weird about your position on it is you're the one that introduced me to these questions about the moon landing way back those years ago. And when you were giving that presentation, I was like, this guy, what's going on here? Of course we and then you asked good questions, and so that led me to more questions, and then I eventually find myself, where I am now. And so I just find it weird that you're one of the guys that really introduced me to that level of lie, let's say, that level of truth or lie, however you want to say it. So I think it is interesting that you are a globe Earth to the core guy. So it's
well, yeah, and I'll tell you why. I think if you throw a baseball, it's quite spherical, right? And if you look at the rocks in a stream as they tumble downstream, they become, instead of jagged edge, they become more rounded. Okay, not perfectly spherical, but they become more rounded. They become more polished. And if you take some gemstones, raw gemstones, and you put them in a tumbler with some abrasive compound, and you tumble them for a few months, the jagged edges become rounded and they become, more desirable. But they're rounded. And I think as objects fly through the universe, through space, they become more rounded rather than a flat sheet, if you will, like a piece of plywood or a board. And that's my take on it. And that's just part of the take on it. Rick, what are your thoughts about flat Earth? Do you think the Earth is flat? Hey, Rick, you there?
Dr. Miller. You there?
Oh, hang on a second.
What just happened?
Okay, so we were talking about the flat Earth, and Robert in Kansas mentioned that I was somewhat instrumental in introducing him to thinking differently. For example, I mentioned in a presentation how big are the lies, and I talked about the moon landing being a hoax. But yet, we're all taught in school that we put some guys up on a capsule on top of a rocket. We blasted off from Earth. We circled the Earth, and then we went out to the moon, and we landed on the moon, and then we walked around, got back in the capsule, blasted off, and came back home. Splashed down the ocean, got out, and had a big parade. And I said that's nonsense. The part about landing on the moon.
We don't know really. I'll tell you what I do know. When I was at Mission Control in 1971, the reason they do 5, 4, 3 is because just before ignition, they have to punch a hole in the Van Allen belt so you can get through it. If you can't get through that Van Allen belt, everything is fried. And they had to create a hole back in 1971. Now, the Sputnik and space race was such that we were embarrassed when Sputnik and the Russians were the first in space with their dogs, Pavlov, and astronauts. And it was back then imperative that we look like we were leading the race by landing on the moon. Now, landing on the moon is not as simple as you think. And just putting an astronaut into space, you'll notice that the dog and those astronauts are dead. Now, that's a metaphor for what I meant by nothing we're being told is real, and who knows what. Who did that? Who did the 2000 Space Odyssey? Who was the director of that? That was
Kubrick?
Yeah, Kubrick. Kubrick came out publicly and said, I filmed it on Earth. They did it out in Arizona, in a desert. Now, is that true?
Oh.
Well, I don't know. I believe Kubrick, but just because Kubrick said it doesn't mean it's true any more than just because I said it, it's true. It's an opinion. And when you get to that level of information, now we have, classified, secret, top secret, and top secret with volt permits. And I had 3 volt permits at the time that was all happening. And I can tell you, to put an astronaut in space was almost verging on impossible because of the 5G technology. Why would you want to bring it down on the surface of the planet? It's killing the bees, it's killing ants, it's flies, that's what the Van Allen belt was this ionized layer of charged particles protecting the Earth from the creepy of outer space and things called gamma rays. And we're talking about hardcore radiation. There's no way we can, at this moment, go to Mars because we don't have any kind of shielding to protect the life forms inside. The rats and mice experiments, nothing arrives on Mars is still alive. And that's why we have tunneling concepts and how to maybe do it without going through outer space. Well, that's because a few weeks back I talked about space not being real. It's a construct. Man, as we currently enjoy our awareness, is not what we think we are. And it's time.
So here's a quick question then. And you mentioned the Van Allen radiation belt. If we punched a hole in it, what did we punch a hole in it with?
Well, today we use HARP, but back then, they had lasers and they had other kinds of vehicles that would explode just before.
Okay, so you're talking about like a missile, send a missile up with either a timer or an altimeter, and
with precision to the liftoff, so that hole, before it got closed back up by the Van Allen belt, which it does, you were able to get through it. And now, guess what? We've got holes in the Van Allen belt, and that's not good at all. And you watch the Aurora Borealis and some of these little light shows that are going on, and isn't that beautiful? Imagine what that's doing to your gene pool. And, those things, is this good or bad? And it's like Earth being round or flat. Yes. It depends on how you choose to look at what's going on, whether you have a problem or you have God, doing something wonderful. It's all opinion, and man's opinion is lower down on the totem pole than several cetacean and other kinds of things going on. Now, who's the dominant species on your planet? And then I would ask you, how many ants are on your property?
Well, I hope the dominant species is not Democrats.
Well, or Republicans. I remember the look on my dad's face when he realized he was no longer a Republican. I thought he was going to commit suicide. And then the Democrats coming out. My sister runs the Democratic Party for the state of Washington. And I love everybody. But politics, and I'm not a politician, what I am is a nerd, I know that I'm never really going to know what's actually really going on, because I can tell you there are all kinds of different Democrats and Republicans. And if you think that Portland and Seattle are about, and Kenosha and all your little Midwest cities and all that creepy rioting and looting and violence is about Black Matters, you've got to screw loose. Because
I think that's more about all the lies, all the misrepresentation, all the fraud that has been perpetrated on we the villagers, and we've had it. We've absolutely had it, and it's coming out as Black Lives Matter. It's coming out as the Proud Boys.
I remember when the Arabs used to sell white children as slaves in a slave market. This is not about black and white and value systems with pedophiles and drinking blood from children and things like that. There's something else going on. And I don't know that any of us are going to ever really know the answer on it. So what we have to do is listen to people like you, others, and then make your own decisions. And the problem is everybody's going to be different in their conclusions. And who's right?
Robert in Kansas, you've been quiet, and I'm wondering if you've been quiet because your air button's not lit up, or are you being quiet? Oh, okay. Nathan
Vincent,
just took care.
I was listening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to. That was really good stuff, gentlemen. Appreciate that. I wanted to second Dr. Miller. You said that the censorship is an issue, and I can tell you firsthand. For me, I'm basically banned from the internet. I don't care what sort of social media you can think of. I'm pretty much off the internet. And then I'm surprised my phone works, really. But what they're using it as is a warfare type operation. It's a literal warfare level censorship where they're controlling the conversation, like the politics you guys were talking about, the culture war. We're in the information space right here, right? So downstream from us is the culture, then the politics, then the policy, right? So what they're doing is controlling the national conversation through that censorship. And if you're conservative, Christian, Trump, white man, heterosexual, whatever, if you're just anything, you just don't believe everything you're told on CNN, they're censoring you. And it's wild, man. It's affected my friends, like people I know personally, where they're being censored. And these are like, compared to me, these are very normal type people. They're not like me. They're very mainstream people, and they're being censored for questioning climate change or not saying I'm not going to take a vaccine. They're saying, oh, well, you get banned off of Facebook then. It's like, well, that's what's going on, Dr. Miller, and you are absolutely right. And then I have one more comment to you, Vincent, about your power lines thing, if you got time for it.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
I just wanted to say, I want to say that just real quick, and I'll get off. Decentralized energy, wind and solar. Obviously, you know what you're talking about there firsthand. But really, Vincent, bringing that to some kind of scale is what would be necessary in terms of like a policy of like a county, a town, whatever. And then moving out from there. But you also know who that threatens to. So it's some real serious business.
I tried to do it. I literally tried to do exactly what you're talking about, Robert, in Kansas, here in our area, and I got laughed at. And literally, out of 37,000 possible votes, I got 100 votes to be on the board of directors. I got really, really trampled with my comments. So, class, if you'd like to go to his website, richardalanmiller.com, Richard A-L-A-N. Miller, M-I-L-L-E-R.com. Rick, I've noticed, and I want to make sure that this is very clear, that I'm not picking on our commercials, okay? I am not picking on our commercials. But what I have heard in the last couple sets of commercials is about 4 commercials regarding taxes. Okay? Now, why is that? And I've noticed that because people get confused by the tax system. And it is extremely complex. It is so complex that if you call the IRS and you say, I've just got one question, they'll tell you that they'll read from some script on some screen. They'll say, okay, wait, what's the question? And then they'll type the question into a computer screen, and then they'll get some answers, some text that they can read. And they go, okay, they don't say it this way, but paragraph 1 says, and then you go, okay, so is that the answer? Well, that's what it says. Well, okay, so if I do that, will I be complying with the code? Well, I can't tell you that. Well, wait a minute. So why am I calling you? Well, because you wanted the answer. So, but you're telling me that.
Oh man.
So well, I'm not kidding, Rick. So what really happens is the IRS tells you, if you ask them, okay, so what was your name again? Joe. Okay, Joe. Do you have a last name? No, we don't give our last names. Okay, Joe doesn't have a last name. I talked to him at on X date at 11:47 a.m. And here's what he said. Now you can write that down, but that doesn't mean it's the right answer. What I'm saying is, we're talking about the cars and the complexity of all these computer driven systems with sensors on cars. Well, the tax code is like that. It's just as bad. It is so bad that the average owner of a paycheck cannot complete the tax forms that the IRS and the federal government demand that you volunteer for every year. So we have a system that is so complex in terms of the tax code that if you ask virtually anyone, hey, y'all do your own taxes, right? Oh, no. How come? Well, I don't have time for it. Oh, you really don't have time? You don't have time to fill out your own taxes? Well, it's complicated. Okay. So is it complicated? Yeah. So it's complicated. So you pay, how much do you pay to have someone fill out your taxes since you don't do it yourself? Oh, I don't know, $700, $400 a year. So you pay some guy $400 to $700 a year because it's too complicated and you don't have time. Right. Actually, they can't comprehend the complexity of it because they don't want to do it. Because it's too hard. It's kind of like farming, Rick. So here we are. We now live in a world where the systems are so complex that the average guy or gal can't manage it.
That's why they complicated the universe by making it so complex. They had to be specialists, one talking to another. And someone like me that's a polymath can jump those bridges like you. And that's the distinction of compartmentalizing everything so that you can't get there from here.
Well, and there's another thing. We used to get owner's manuals. Now, I don't have a smart phone, but I believe that the smartphones really don't have operating manuals to tell you exactly how all the features work. I believe you have to figure that out for yourself because the manuals would be so complex, and by the time they wrote the manual, the software would be updated and the manual would be obsolete. So here we have
That's
phones.
correct, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So here we have phones that people use every day, and they really don't know all the features. As a matter of fact, I was talking with one of our instructors off the air years ago about the features of a vehicle that he has. And this is a vehicle that's, let's say 10 years old. Maybe a little bit more, around 10 years old. And he hasn't pushed every button, tried every dial, and doesn't know all of the features. Now, he's not alone. I'm not picking on this guy. He's a really bright guy. He's like everybody else in terms of we haven't tried all the buttons, haven't turned all the dials, don't know what all these displays mean. And if you have a Mercedes...
there's more things to fail, like the old Cadillacs that had automatic windows, instead of rolling them up by hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, by the way, pretty much every vehicle that we have that has electric windows has had what's called an electric window regulator. A regulator would be the mechanism that lets you, that is attached to the motor inside the door that pushes the window up or pulls it down. That's the window regulator. And every vehicle that we have that has electric windows has had at least one of those fail. At least one. And that's a several $100. Yeah. But now we have a 91.
You know what they do in produce? They'll take a big, they have your orange at one price. If you buy a bag of oranges, it's much cheaper. But they put 2 oranges on the bottom that are 3 weeks old so that it rots.
Yeah, that's a feature. That way you don't have to eat those oranges.
It means we end up spending more money for the bag than you thought you would because you have 3 of them that are no good.
Yeah. Well, we have 2 vehicles here on the farm that have roll-up windows. And you know what? Neither one of those has failed. And one's a 2004 Chevy truck and the other's a 1990s, early 90s Jeep. Roll-up windows. And they still work perfectly. Hey, Rick, thanks so much for being with us.